All right, guys. Today we're going to talk a little bit about film structure and one film structure in particular, and that's the hero's journey. So, film structure in and of itself is not all that different from traditional literature structure. The way that action occurs is pretty much the same traditionally. And traditional film always begins with exposition. And exposition is basically when the director introduces characters, establishes the world in which these characters live, and kind of sets the scene for what's to come. Because all the major changes that occur throughout a movie, if you don't know what the baseline is, you're not going to understand how these characters grow and evolve and how the world changes around them. Um, when the world starts to change is what we call the rising action. The rising action really starts right here at this this juncture between exposition and rising action. That's where the conflict occurs, and the conflict is usually something that comes between the protagonist and something that he or she wants, something that is getting in the way of the protagonist living their life as they want to, and that leads to the rising action. The rising action is just the increase in in a tense feeling, the increase in action, whatever you want to call it. The rising action then concludes with what we call the climax. The climax occurs when the action is at its peak, and when the conflict is the most intense between between the protagonist and whatever's standing in his or her way. After the climax, the falling action occurs, and that's really when the climax begins to be resolved, and then the action of the plot begins to kind of slow down. And then finally, the resolution is when that conflict is completely resolved and the action ends, typically closer to the end of the movie. A lot of times, and you'll notice the difference between where the exposition starts and where the resolution ends on the graph. That goes to show that the world changes permanently for the main character after the actions of the movie. They don't just go back to the way life was before. Something has changed in some way. So, an example of the hero's journey can be found in a bunch of different movies. It was originally based, well, the theory of the hero's journey you can see a lot in Greek myths and mythology, such as the Iliad, the Odyssey, any of those things. And it's composed of 17 different stages, and those 17 stages are divided into three legs, as we'll call them. A lot of movies have this hero's journey structure. The Matrix we watched earlier in the year has that. The Dark Knight, and something as immature as Finding Nemo has that same structure. So it doesn't have to be a super serious movie to have the hero's journey. So the first leg of the hero's journey is called the departure, and it is the beginning of the movie. Really, it's the character going from their normal life into this adventure. So the very first stage is called the call to adventure, in which the hero receives a call to leave his or her normal life and face adventure. And the call doesn't have to be a literal call. Someone doesn't have to be speaking to them. It's more so just they feel the need, or they're put in a situation in which they have to go on this adventure. Now, stage two can sometimes happen, sometimes not, but a lot of times heroes will refuse the call because they don't want to go into an uncomfortable situation. They don't want to change the life that they're living right now. A great example would be in either the book or the movie of The Hobbit. The Hobbit is a very good example of a refusal of the call. Stage three is what we call supernatural aid. So this occurs in which a mentor will provide the hero with some kind of tool or talisman or information that's going to help them later on in their quest. And it says supernatural aid. Not all movies are going to have supernatural aid, but they're going to have aid from some outside source. Stage four is the crossing of the first threshold. It's when the hero leaves their familiar life and goes off to venture into the unknown. And that really marks the beginning of their adventure and their transformation. Stage five is what we call the belly of the whale. Not that they literally have to end up in the belly of a whale, but it's in which the hero gets to a point where he or she cannot go back to the way life was before. They can't go back to the beginning of their journey. They're in and they're stuck there, and they have to go see this journey through to the end. Stage six, the road of trials. This is probably most of the movie. Stage six is really just all the different tasks and tests and ordeals that the character has to go through to get to the end. Stage seven is what we call the meeting with the goddess. It's when the hero finds his or her true love or close companion. It could be a platonic companion. This one's another one of those that doesn't necessarily pop up in every single movie that has the hero's journey, but it's part of it. Stage 8 is temptation. A lot of times heroes are tempted to stray from the path in some way. They are tempted to stop their quest for some personal reason, right? They quit for some reason. They feel they can't do it, or they feel they don't want to do it anymore. Stage 9 is atonement with the father. The hero replaces his or her master or father figure, so takes the place of the person who mentored them or trained them or got them to where they are. Again, not necessarily in every single movie, but still part of it. Stage 10 is the apotheosis, and the apotheosis is when when a particular major character dies or transitions to a different plane. A good example of apotheosis is when Obi-Wan Kenobi dies in Episode 4 of the Star Wars series. Stage 11 is the ultimate boon, in which the hero reaches the final goal, gains the final reward. This is the climax, right? So, the hero saves the princess, or, Indiana Jones goes and finds the Holy Grail. That's the ultimate boon. But you'll notice this is step 11. This is not nearly, this is barely halfway through this process, so there's still a lot to go. And then the final leg of the journey is the return. And starting with stage 12, which is the refusal of the return, sometimes heroes might, having the power or the reward that they've gained, they don't want to go back to their old life because their life has changed and they like their new life with this reward or this thing that they've achieved. Stage 13 is the magic flight, in which they escape with the reward. There might be some challenges along the way, or the reward may hinder the act of returning. So maybe they can't go back to the life they lived before because of the reward that they have now. Stage 14, the rescue from without. A lot of times they'll need to be rescued by an outside source. If you've seen The Lord of the Rings, when Frodo and Sam get picked up by the eagles, that would be an example of rescue from without. Stage 15, the crossing of the return threshold, is when the hero returns to his or her old life, but must integrate the experiences they've had and the way they are now and the ways that they've changed into their old life. Stage 16 is Master of Two Worlds. The hero accepts his or her new place in the world and the responsibility that comes with it. Often this responsibility is something that they feared back in the beginning of the movie, and now they don't fear that anymore. And then finally, stage 17 is the freedom to live. The journey is complete, and the hero returns home, and he or she is now free to live however they want with that new information or that new status or that new skill that they've learned along the way of the journey, right? So like I said before, the hero's journey in movies does not always have every single one of these 17 different stages, and it's going to be your job to really identify which ones are there and which ones are not. That being said, too, they're not always in the same order either. So sometimes you might have a stage 4 before a stage 2. There are some things happen. They don't necessarily go in sequence, but make sure you're familiar with these definitions so you can keep an eye out as you're watching whatever movie you choose. A lot of times, though, when they have a hero's journey structure, they have at least 1 or 2 stages per leg and include all 3 legs of the structure. So please try to identify at least 1 or 2 per leg throughout the course of the movie. So what you're going to do first this week, really super simple discussion board questions. I'm going to ask you to go and find the Hero's Journey discussion board and respond to the following questions in 1 to 2 sentences. So the first one, what are some quote-unquote rites of passage or major life events that people could experience in their lives? What are some big major events in people's lives? And it doesn't necessarily have to be your life, just be something that works for somebody else. So it could be something as formal as a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah, or it could be something like just a specific birthday that means a lot to somebody. What is one rite of passage that you have experienced that you feel is the most important in your life? It can be a particular birthday, an achievement, maybe graduation coming up, or another major life event. And then finally, the third one here, how do you feel this particular event has changed you as an individual? Because again, when we talk about the hero's journey, we talk about these specific events that happen to them and how they change as individuals. And then as you watch your movie for this week, and the list is posted on the movie options Google Doc, it should be on the second page. You can pick one of those movies from the Hero's Journey list, and you're going to complete a Hero's Journey movie analysis. Basically, I have all the stages of the Hero's Journey listed out, and all you need to do is just type in the examples from the movie you chose that fall into each stage of the hero's journey. If you're in a situation where the hero's journey, the stage of the hero's journey is not present in the movie that you chose, then just type NA or non-existent, whatever. Make it, and don't just leave it blank because I'll think you just skipped it. Please put some indication that you couldn't find that particular stage in the movie that you chose. As always, if you have any questions, please email me or contact me on the Google Hangout. Be happy to help you out. Hope you enjoy the movies this week.